Thanks, Merrick. All right, today is officially 420 and the unofficial marijuana holiday, and it's the first 420 since recreational marijuana was legalized in California.
Legal pot sales mean tax revenue for cities all over the state. How about using some of that money to maybe help the homelessness issue that we're experiencing?
That's what our next guest, Allison Margolin, recently suggested. Allison is a Columbia and Harvard Law graduate who specializes in cannabis licensing and law. Welcome.
Good morning,
Allison. So that's our first question.
Yeah.
Like, you propose to use tax revenue from the sales of cannabis to help the homelessness. How?
Well, I think in addition to the tax revenue, there's a social equity program in Los Angeles which requires cannabis licensing candidates, like people who want to sell marijuana, grow it, to actually participate in a community service-like program. And if the city council just made a slight alteration and allowed these candidates to actually construct temporary yurts, housing for people, I think also tents where people can do things like have child services, there can be harm reduction tents, medical service tents, and the licensing candidates can actually be involved in the immediate construction of it. Because the plans the mayor's announced talk about, a year from now, next April, what the state is considering is something that's not dealing with what we have now, which is an acute crisis. And we have people who can actually do the work.
Can we get more specific, Allison? And so everybody and our viewers at home know you're a Harvard-educated lawyer. You've sort of transitioned your practice specifically to cannabis and to cannabis law. Can you tell us numbers, statistics? I mean, we interviewed Mayor Garcetti. He talked about the $5 billion that's going to be spent over the next 10 years building housing. I mean, talk us specifically. What are you thinking here?
Well, what I'm thinking is that there's probably about 10,000 individuals or corporations that are actually applying to have cannabis licenses. In order to actually enter the next phase of licensing that's coming up like in 2 weeks, these candidates have to do something that's community service oriented. If literally these candidates, who many of whom have experience doing electricity, doing construction, doing things that would be vital to constructing temporary housing units for the homeless, they could actually use these people right now to make temporary housing locations for homeless people instead of having to wait to use these billions of dollars in a year from now and have all these committees that have been established to do something a year from now. Right now on Skid Row, we have an acute crisis. We even have a lack of bathrooms. So like even just installing porta potties and having some of the donation money being used for bathrooms. Things like that are acute problems can be remedied immediately through using both the taxes and literally the bodies of individuals who are applying for these licenses.
Okay, so those are all great. Now,
Yes.
You are considered the weed expert, legal weed expert. So
Yes.
or cannabis expert, I should say. We have some scenarios for you, and some people at home probably have some questions about what's legal, what's illegal. So let's start. Let's say, not me personally, but a person smokes weed and they get drug tested at work. Are they in trouble? Because weed is legal, cannabis, excuse me.
Well, unfortunately, most workplaces that do drug testing don't allow marijuana, and there's no legal protection right now under the current law for employees. That can change, and I actually just gave a speech about this to a union in the Valley, but it requires unions and other workers to literally come forward and say that they don't want marijuana to be part of the drug testing apparatus, but right now there's no legal protection for them.
Is that considered discrimination then?
It's
I mean,
not.
what is it?
Well, right now it's not considered discrimination, unfortunately, because of course under the federal law, cannabis is still illegal, so it wouldn't be considered discrimination.
So employers can still decide and say, hey, we frown upon that, right? Or
This is true.
Yeah.
This is true.
Okay. Not most. The dispensaries right now are cash only, right? And I didn't know this until today. I was like, why? Because it creates crime issues. People looking at it and they go, oh, I know there's a lot of cash, a dispensary. They can't accept Visa, debit, anything like that because federally we can't have money that banks touch. Is that the reason why? Would it help alleviate, say, the crime issue if dispensaries would accept cards as opposed, because we see all the time they're robbed? Well,
what's very interesting is LA is actually going to require a credit card processing system called Links, and it's going to go cashless when they start instituting this.
Okay.
But one of the big impediments is the federal law.
Cashless in terms of, what are we talking
about?
Well,
like a credit card processing.
A Venmo thing?
Yeah, like a Venmo, like a link. It's
PayPal?
called Links is the thing that they're considering.
Transference of money.
Exactly, but the issue is the federal law. Unfortunately, there's literally legislation pending in both the U.S. Congress and our state legislature to try to allow for banking with marijuana, but that is the entire issue right now. Banks will not accept cannabis funds, and especially after Sessions made his announcements in November, banks are very reticent to accept those funds. So it is a cash-based system now out of necessity, but if the federal law changes, which it seems actually like the only thing that has bipartisan support in Congress, then we can make some inroads on this issue. But the federal law has to change for banks to feel comfortable accepting those funds.
So here's another one. I smell weed all the time when I'm walking around. Can you smoke weed in public, or is it, in your car? It's kind of like it's legal, so can you?
Well, it's an infraction to smoke in your car, so you're not supposed to do that. And then also, you may be mistaken for a DUI if a police officer believes that you're moving the motor vehicle or about to move the motor vehicle. In terms of public, there are no laws really against smoking in public, although there is some type of infraction that people can face in certain circumstances. But in reality, smoking in public, as long as you're not near
Schools.
children and schools,
Yeah.
is somewhat tolerated. I think that's obviously
People
a
still
good
have to be
thing.
responsible. A couple of
Yes.
studies are out today in Washington. Traffic-related accidents from people with marijuana have doubled. In Colorado, 30% of marijuana users there say they drive high daily. So still have to be responsible. Today's 420 for everybody, but right?
Of course.
Yeah, so-
But they're now obviously testing all those people for marijuana. So
Okay.
Allison
Allison?
Margolin, thank you. We have
No
a lot more
problem.
questions. We could have had a little more time, but thank you.
no
Probably
problem.
be
Thank you
back.
guys.
All
Happy
right.
420. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.